You are listening to From Sobriety to Recovery with Jesse Mogul. Let's get to the show. Welcome back to From Sobriety to Recovery. I am your host, Jesse Mogul. I am in addiction recovery, and I am walking the treadmill, middle of a Saturday afternoon, just enjoying the rain as it sweeps through North Alabama. We are nearing the end of spring. Here comes the solstice. I believe that is what it is called. Yes, because the equinox would be when the days are equal. And here we are coming up on the longest day of the year, somewhere right around June 22nd. I will be turning 48 on June 15th, and next weekend on June 8th, we will be going to see the Rolling Stones in Atlanta for what I assume will be the last opportunity I'll have to see this band live. I have yet to see them before, and in my hundreds and hundreds, probably 1,000 different bands I've seen, if not actual shows I've attended, I've never seen the Rolling Stones. So this is definitely one of those that was not a cheap ticket, but it was certainly one of those concerts that I always told myself I wanted to do. Aerosmith's coming up later this year, and while I did see them many times in the mid-'90s, I haven't seen them in quite some time. And some of these bands, they're just nearing that stage where if they're not going to retire, certainly Father Time will make them retire. So there's a lot of really interesting things coming up in June that I'm really looking forward to. As much as just getting outside and being more active out there, considering, I do live in a place where, while they say it's the South, it does definitely get cold here. And for a lot of us, as we begin to venture from spring into summer, it's that chance to leave the hibernating state that we've been in for quite some time as we go through those doldrums of winter. And now we're awakening ourselves into what spring and summer can be. And we really want to be looking at opportunities to make memories. And for those of us who are in long-term recovery, then now we might have been venturing into putting ourselves into situations where potentially in the past we may have been more susceptible to using alcohol or drugs. And maybe there's a comfortability now about going to backyard barbecues, weddings and bar mitzvahs and quinceañeras and all of those things where alcohol is generally going to be a centerpiece of it. For those of y'all who are getting new into sobriety, there might be some trepidation, some worry, some concern, some anxious feelings around going out and making memories at places where you know alcohol is going to be imbibed, where drugs could be readily available. And you have to make this decision about whether you're putting yourself into those situations versus just holding it back, throttling it down a little bit, and deciding maybe you're going to skip that barbecue. You're not going to go to that family event. You're not going to go see your friends at that one party they're all going to, because you don't want to put yourself into these situations. And it's going to be very important for you to just monitor how you feel internally about not going to certain events versus going to certain events, and what kind of predicament you could involve yourself in that potentially would not behoove you, benefit you to be involved in. And this is really important because when we get ourselves into sobriety and recovery, we can look back at our addicted lives, and if we really were to break it down, there could have been a lot of fear of missing out, and you only live once. That FOMO, YOLO bullshit that we seem to have attached ourselves to during active addiction. Spit that out 10 times fast. And one of the interesting things that I noticed, that even now, coming up on 7.5 years of sobriety and recovery, is that there is still some animosity I hold toward myself because of my perceived wasted time in my 20s and 30s. Like, I have this perception that I've wasted so much time in my 20s and 30s that it can cause me now still to drive and push myself and want to fill my schedule up with lots of really awesome things that, while I do enjoy them, they can also wear me out. I mean, I currently have multiple streams of income outside my business as well as inside the business, working on growing that. being able to put together an active way of turning what I do into a career by going to school, getting the master's degree, becoming a licensed professional counselor. All of these things I wildly enjoy. First and foremost, this podcast is one of my favorite things that I do. But it can get to a point where I have to step back and ask myself, am I trying to run myself ragged the way that I am right now simply because I'm trying to get somewhere really fast to make up for something I didn't do in my 20s and 30s? Now, becoming a therapist wasn't even on my radar in my 20s and 30s, and there's not a part of me that would have thought about doing this then that now I'm so excited about. And I do realize upon starting this that we're not looking at completely being done and running my own private practice till probably somewhere in my I'm already in my late 40s. I'll be in my early 50s by the time this really comes to fruition. And so let's talk today about this fallacy about making up for lost time and being able to somehow get ahead of where we think we should be or should have been or could have been had we not spent so many years in active addiction. And this really does roll right along with episode 289, Regrets and Forgiving Yourself, talking about your truth and letting people into your emotions in 288. Forgetting, I loved that topic in 287 because we often aren't going to remember what we did 3 days ago. So that's when we push ourselves to do the hard thing. I met with a brand new client yesterday, and one of the mantras that we created for him was, I do hard things. Because that really is what breaks us out of our comfort zone. That's what gives us that strength and fortitude to know we can accomplish things, is when we do hard things. If everything is easy, there's not much sense of accomplishment around it. If I had to dig a 3-foot deep hole to put a fence post in, and I went outside and the ground was super soft and it was like soft as sand, and then 5 minutes later the whole project's done, there wouldn't be that much sense of accomplishment to that. Conversely, if the ground was very difficult to dig into, it took a lot of muscle exertion, and when it was finally done, I could say, damn, that was hard. Because doing hard things is what gives us that internal drive and self-confidence to continue to do hard things. Doing easy things, I'm telling you, I know this isn't going to be one of those universal quantifier moments where I say every single time something's easy, we don't get to feel accomplishment, because that's just not going to completely 100% ever be true. But certainly, if you look back in your life at the things that you're most proud of, it's going to be the things that were difficult. And I'm telling you, getting over alcohol and drugs, or even a process addiction like sex or gambling or pornography, being able to move from that addiction into the sobriety recovery aspect, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. Like, I could be using NLP language here saying, well, it's only hard if you perceive it to be hard, and it could be a challenge, and it could just be determined to be fun. But let's just cut the bullshit for a moment, and let's just realize that when you have tied so many of your habits and so much of your mentality and so many of your emotional groundedness and just what you do with your free time, when you have connected so many different areas of your life to your addiction, it is going to be able to creep in. It's going to be one of those things where you don't even see it coming, and boom, addiction's sitting right next to you being like, hey man, what's going on? You sure you don't want to use today? Because it's wired. Our brains have changed. We have shifted. And that's why I go over so many of these topics over and over again, because it's through the rewiring process where we can realize that prioritizing what we want most overall in our lives is more important than doing something right now for that immediate gratification. How are we going to decide to respond to anxiety and stress? That's what the topics of the 280s have been. And if you go back and look, there's a story arc that we're creating because we're nearing the 300s. And so we're going to start off with this episode 290 being what we're going to at this moment discuss time, because there's so many aspects of ourselves that wants to beat ourselves down because we wasted time. That perception that whatever we were doing in active addiction was a colossal waste of time. It's not true, because you've learned things about yourself. You've learned things along the way. It could have just been your intestinal fortitude to wake up day in and day out with a massive hangover, going to work, making money so you could just go get high again. I did that for most of my latter part of my 30s in Los Angeles. I willingly gave up the red carpet interviewing and the sports writing and the morning talk show hosting and all these gigs that I had picked up along the way in favor. I even remember I was taking these super cool DJ classes. I was totally getting into DJing, and I started leaving them early just so I could go back out to my car and drink. And I would go home and I would just drink. And I remember being like, all I ever wanted to do was like learn the nuances of DJing, like more than just wedding DJing, like actually learning to mix and to break songs down and to figure out the beats and all that. It was the coolest school. And I ultimately stopped doing that simply because I wanted to be able to stay at home and get drunk more often. I willingly gave up all of these cool hobbies that I wanted to take on because of addiction. And now here I am in my 40s thinking, okay, well, let's pick these things up. Let's learn to juggle. Let's learn the ukulele. Let's learn the xylophone. Let's eventually get that DJ equipment back in my life. And there's a time and a place for all of that stuff. But I want you to realize that thinking that you can make up for lost time isn't going to work. You do hard things. And the first hard thing you're going to do is you're going to move through this addiction and realize that it's going to try to creep. And it's going to try to convince you that coming back to your old ways is the only way to live your life. Thinking you can make up for lost time it's a fallacy. It's make-believe. Because time is gone. It is the one resource that is not possible for us to rewind on, right? Like we can find a lot of oil in the ground, and there's inevitably going to be somewhere we can find some water and turn it into drinkable water. I mean, a lot of resources that we use on a regular basis, while they aren't, forever renewable, they are certainly renewable in the short term. I get oil isn't renewable as it's traditionally classified, but there's a whole lot of it, and we're going to have a lot of it for many years. But time, we can't reverse time. Doc Brown, Marty McFly, Einstein the dog are not showing up in your front yard being like, sure you don't want to go back to your 20s and decide to do that differently? So what can you do now in order to realize that you are exactly where you need to be? I want you to create a mindset of realistic expectations. Release the undue pressure that could lead to feelings of inadequacy, frustration, despair, hopelessness. As if this whole process of addiction recovery, it was ever meant to go fast, was ever meant to be a quick fix. It's when we're looking for quick fixes in our addiction recovery, that's when we go headlong into just the wall. Right? We can ride that pink cloud. In many cases, I still feel like I'm on the pink cloud. But in the end, what we're really experiencing when we're on this metaphorical pink cloud is just the joys that can come from no longer feeling like we're handcuffed to our addiction. The isolation, the despair, the hopelessness that comes from day in and day out, making our primary functionality being seeking out our next high. So addiction is a chronic condition. Right? It has been classified as a disease. Now, society can argue about whether addiction is a disease until it's blue in the face. We have taken an external thing that has caused an internal rewiring. It's changed us at a cellular level. It has not changed necessarily our chromosomes, right? We're born the way we're born. Chromosomes are all figured out then, but our DNA, our structural cells in our brains, they have changed. Right? Whenever you get too much sunlight, it changes the structure of your cells and it creates cancer. Addiction's a disease. It has changed us. People want to think, oh, you chose to continue drinking, therefore it's not a disease because nobody chooses to get cancer. Well, somebody did choose to go out in the sunshine for day in and day out for years and years without protective covering and sunscreen. We certainly drink other things that don't get us intoxicated that have been shown to create cancer. The thing about cancer and trying to equate addiction to cancer is we're never really sure what the one thing is that we did that brought cancer into our lives, that created it, that metastasized it in our body. Or there's, any more than, we could say, I guess, diabetes. It's classified as a disease. And a lot of people would say if you ate too much sugar, that's how you get diabetes. So that person willingly continued eating sugar. Right? But it gets to a point where society doesn't shame that, but it still wants to shame addiction. And let those who want to shame us, that's their own prerogative. For us, within this community, we can say, yes, it's a disease. It's changed us at a cellular level. It's altered our brain chemistry. It's altered our behaviors. It was a gradual process. Had we seen where we were going to end up, there's probably very few of us who would have taken that first hit, let alone taken the next 10,000 of them. So we're not racing to a finish line. We're looking for sustained, marathon-esque, long-term healing and growth. Because when you have these unrealistic expectations that you can swiftly make up for lost time, that you can heal your brain, that you can rewire yourself to have your emotional centeredness now be at a homeostasis where you're not going wildly sad or wildly happy, where you're feeling like you're more grounded and you're operating in sort of that mid-range most of the time. When we think that we're just going to be able to snap our fingers and get there, that's pressure. And when we start applying that level of pressure to ourselves, inevitably we're going to burn ourselves out, or we're going to fail one day and we're going to snap and we're going to yell, or we're going to be sad, or we're going to have a really happy day. And part of our brain's going to be like, man, when you were really happy or really sad in the past, you know what always helped you get less sad, or what helped you make you even more happy? Using. And then we find ourselves lapsing, and we could even find ourselves relapsing. Meaning that lapsing is using, one day, once or twice over a couple days, and then coming back out of it saying, okay, let's right the ship, versus relapsing where we just go right back to our old behaviors of blacking out, using 5, 6, 7 times a day. And now we find ourselves really just where we were at before, with some experience of going days or weeks or months without using. But still, there's going to be that level of failure we feel inside of our brains. And we want to try to put ourselves in a situation where we're feeling less of the failure and more of the positive feedback that comes from working our program, trying even harder, sustainably figuring out a way to live our life where we're not looking for that crutch, that best friend who turned into our worst enemy, thinking that that's going to be the way for our salvation, because it's not. And when we have unrealistic expectations about how fast we can figure out our lives, we can get our finances fixed up, we can get our relationships back on track, we have this fallacy in our head that, wow, if I just work harder, if I just push myself harder, if I just do something faster, it can make up for all those days, weeks, months, and years I wasn't doing it. And that's just not the way that it works. You're going to get yourself where you're going to get yourself. And you could decide not to sleep for 168 hours straight in order to get some kind of project done. And you will come to the finish line of that project for work, whatever it might be. And eventually your brain's going to be mush. They say that, a couple days in a row of less than 5, 6 hours of sleep makes the average person feel like they're on a couple beers. Like it's like your brain is operating as if it was legally drunk off of just 3 days in a row of only 5 hours of sleep. Now, a lot of us have done this no sleep thing and think, I didn't feel like that. But what would our reaction time be? What's our cognitive skill still like? So whether I believe all of those studies saying that if I go multiple days in a row without adequate sleep, that somehow my body is operating as if it was intoxicated, I see where that isn't always true, but I definitely see where I get a little bit more short-tempered. I start craving sugar and carbohydrates a little bit more. My work productivity begins to fall off. When I reread over the product that I actually finished, it is less than what I know I am capable of. So when we're trying to make up for lost time, we're putting stress on ourselves to somehow be able to take the accumulation of what we could have done in our 20s and accomplish it in our 40s. and also be trying to accomplish the things that we wanted to accomplish in our 30s, in our 40s, as well as trying to accomplish the things we already want to accomplish in our 40s. So we're going to accomplish 3 decades worth of stuff in 1 decade. I don't know mathematically how that would work out, but it certainly does sound nonsensical when I say it out loud. So it's the emphasis on our steady progress, the consistent small steps. I finish all my coaching sessions with a variation of these 2 questions. What's your key takeaway, and what's your smallest next step? Because it's in that smallest next step when we begin to verbalize it, get it out of our heads and make it tangible. Write it down, say it to me, say it to somebody else who's in your support system. Next thing you know, it's them tiny little steps that make these radically drastic changes. It is fantastical watching this neighborhood next to my neighborhood get built. So when we moved into this neighborhood, they'd already leveled all of the trees, and they'd already put all the pipes and the wiring and everything that needed to be figured out for the overall neighborhood had already been laid down. So it was just this gigantic red mud field, really, with the streets already carved out. And back then they were gravel. Now they're paved. And it sat there for the longest time. And then the first house went up. And then the second house and the third house. And before I knew it, one whole arm is what I call these little cul-de-sacs. And there's 4 arms. And so they're building the first arm, which is the closest one to our neighborhood first, because it's the furthest away from the street on the other side where the main entrance to this neighborhood would be. And watching these people build these homes, it's like each day, certain things are very obvious when they put them up, like the roof. But for the most part, they lay a foundation. It sits for a few days while it dries. Next thing you know, they put up the 2x4s and they put up the structure. And you go over there, and every single day I like to get my steps by walking that at the end of the day to see what else they've done. And it's these small incremental changes that all of a sudden have turned into 15 houses being finished. They don't go over there and build the house in a day. They do build it rather quickly. They do clearly have a system for this. But it's not as if they're building a house, boom, it's all up. It goes in stages, which is why it's obvious to me that they're building these houses all at the same time, because there's certain things that need to be done, and then it has to wait, and it settles, and foundations need to dry, and all this other cool stuff's going on. But each day, they're taking these small steps. And the drastic changes, it goes from being a completely empty field to almost 15 houses being completed. And all of this has taken less than 45 days. It's pretty amazing to watch. And is a really good metaphor for our own lives. That each day we get up and, we may lay the foundation, which can be our sobriety and recovery. It can be our program. It can be going to meetings. It can be going to 12 steps, going to Dharma, Smart, Refuge, all of these other opportunities we have, the foundation becomes the sobriety. We are sober. That is now the slab that we are going to be building our house upon. Now, what are going to be the structure of this house that we're building? That's where meetings, that's where our 12 steps, that's where our support systems, and that's where all the things that we begin to add in. And as we begin to build out the structure, the roof on it could be having a long-term career set up so that we have financial stability in our lives. It could be repairing our relationships, our relationships, our personal growth, our finances. That becomes the roof that we live underneath. That's what protects us from the outside, from all the weather and the sunshine and the wind, where we start to create our own little world inside of this metaphorical house that I'm watching be built. Well, I'm watching real houses get built next door, but I'm turning it into a metaphor right now. And the idea here is that as we build this up, we're doing it through these small incremental achievements, and we're celebrating these achievements. I don't care how freaking small the outside world might think it is. For people new to sobriety and recovery, getting out of bed and taking a shower, brushing your teeth, combing your hair, vacuuming your floor. This might seem like adulting 101 to other people, but in whatever stage of sobriety and recovery you're in, I want you to celebrate these small victories, which are huge to us, but could be perceived as small from the outside world. When I first got sober, every single Friday, I celebrated another week of sobriety. What did I just say? Did that come out right? Yeah, every single week of my sobriety for those first year, Fridays meant something because I got sober on a Friday. And then the further I got away from my first day of sobriety, then it became, okay, well, now it's the 13th. And then that was a big thing for like the first 3 or 4 years of my sobriety. Now I'm 7 years in, 13ths are just washing away. But I do pay attention to like June 13th, which is 2 days before my birthday, would be 6 months. It's another 6 months of sobriety. So I sort of corral that in with my birthday. And then, of course, the years, I still will always celebrate those. Another year is just something that's really cool to do. But it's through these small steps, maintaining that motivation, building that confidence, doing the hard thing that allowed me to get to this point. Realizing that I can't turn a blind eye to my recovery process and my program. No matter how far I get from my last drink, I don't ever want to get so far away that there's a part of my brain that thinks that I could go back and just dabble. There is no dabbling for me. I don't even want to try to navigate that gauntlet. I have no interest in that obstacle course at all. It doesn't even remotely sound entertaining to me because I don't think that it would stop with one drink. I used to tell people that I wish that the ocean was made out of Johnny Walker Blue and I could just swim around in it, drink it so much that I just drowned it in it. That's part of me didn't just disappear. I know how I behave on alcohol and drugs, and I don't want them anymore. And part of this healing process is that acceptance of your past, what I've been talking about in these last few episodes. Yes, we made mistakes. We lost some crucial time, right? Regret and guilt, they could fuel that desire to make up for lost time, but it's in the acceptance of what we did in our past as just being what we believed was our best method forward each and every day that we chose in that moment. At the time in your life when you got into alcohol and drugs or continued into alcohol and drugs or got that divorce or spent that money or quit that job, whatever it might have been, you woke up that day and said, this is my best choice, and you made that choice. Looking back, hindsight being 2020, it's easy to say, well, yeah, that was a dumbass choice. But in the time, in the moment, we thought it was a good choice. It's going to be real easy to question your decisions and your outcomes whenever you're sitting on the other side of the entire result. It's not going to help you. Now, I will be the first one to admit that when I first got sober, there was a lot of journaling and a lot of anger and a lot of resentment towards myself about the things that I threw away in my 20s and 30s. Relationships, career opportunities, time in school, friendships. How many times did I go on a really cool trip and spend a majority of the time at the hotel bar or getting housed at some crappy bar instead of going on all the tours I had looked into or going and ziplining or going and seeing the monkeys in the trees. Instead, I spent all the time at the club. Yeah, I went through that process, and I'm not saying to not do that stuff. In fact, I'm encouraging you to journal and write and get that stuff out of your head, because it's in that process of looking back and apologizing to yourself that you can get to heal. And you even become more accepting of your past, realizing that's not how you'll behave today. And you might want to go back on some of those vacations you did in your 20s and relive them through the sober perspective. And you bring in some therapy, bring in some support groups, people who understand that it takes time for this healing. And as you're accepting your past and realizing that you're making healthier progress forward now through the decisions you make to stay away from the intoxicating substance, the process addiction, all of the above, realize that not everything you did back then was a complete waste. A lot of the things you did was teach yourself fortitude, perseverance, determination. Even if the determination was to find blow at 3 a.m, you still were pretty freaking determined and you made it happen. Now, if you just took that strength about finding drugs at 3 a.m. and flipped it over to creating a grounded, solid relationship in your home or figuring out your financial stability, you would be an unstoppable force. Addicts have shown time and time again that we figure shit out when chips are down. Just flip it. And instead of making what you're trying to seek out being alcohol and drugs, just flip it. And now you're trying to seek out long-lasting relationships. Love within your own family. Love within your own heart towards yourself. Financial stability. A career that livens you up each day instead of drains you. Just flip what the carrot at the end of the stick is. Because something's going to drive you. But back in the day, the drive was to be intoxicated, to mute your feelings, to run away from your emotions. Now let's just flip it. That was the carrot at the end of the stick. Now let's flip it and let's make it financial stability, getting out of debt, falling in love, having a career we care about, having a house that isn't looking decrepit and falling down and being the eyesore of the neighborhood. Now be the person everyone's like, man, your shit was going sideways for a long time. But boy, I'll tell you what, you have figured it out. And we know we can figure it out because other people have. It doesn't mean it's easy. And it doesn't mean that, oh, I got sober, therefore you can. No, it doesn't mean it at all. But we know that other people have laid out a blueprint. It's important for us to get a hold of as many other people's blueprints as possible and figure out what pieces of that will help us build our own McMansion of life. Right? There's 5 different house types being built next door. Not all of them are going to look the same. And even when they look very similar on the outside, they don't all have the same kind of bricks. They don't all have the same kind of window treatments. And they're definitely not going to be decorated the same once everybody who buys these homes moves in. Everybody's going to put their own flair into their own house. It might look very similar from the outside, but it's not going to look the same on the inside once it starts getting decorated. How are you decorating your sober house? How are you decorating your addiction recovery house? We're looking for quality here. The quality of your recovery, the depth of your personal growth, that is important, way more so than the speed or the progress. And I understand that you might be getting pushed by people who love you, people who care about you, because they want to see your life get better, or they don't want you calling them up for money anymore, bugging the shit out of them. I get that other people might be looking for pedal to the metal, but when you find people who are in this community who have gone through this, even the Al-Anon people, those who have helped other relatives and loved ones move through this stuff, they will be the first ones, if they've got some true hands-on experience with this, who will say, it takes time. We're building a strong, stable foundation through our sobriety, and it is extremely beneficial that rather than attempting rapid changes, that we're now looking for sustainable changes. I don't care how fast a construction company tells me that they can lay the foundation for the house. I want to know that they're laying down a quality slab, because if that slab cracks anytime that the house is on top of it, we're looking at tens of thousands of dollars worth of problems that are going to happen to that house simply because one construction crew said, we can get a slab done in 3 hours, and the other one's like, it might take us 2 days. But I can guarantee the way we're going to lay it means it will never crack. I'm hiring that slab company for the 2-day job over the one who's like, nope, don't worry, we'll get it done in 3 hours. Hell, we'll lay 27 of these things in 1 day for you. It just doesn't feel like it's going to be as stable and as long-lasting. We want our foundation, our slab of our sobriety and recovery to be something that can last us the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. Part of that is going to be how we treat our body, our minds, and our spirits. Not just in early sobriety and recovery, but throughout the entire process. I can get a little up my own ass and drive myself so hard. And next thing I know, I come out of like a 2-3 week where I'm just expelling so much energy, much like it was at the end of March into April. That was a really tough 3 weeks. And I'm glad I accomplished it. It lets me know that I can put a lot of things on my plate and get them all done to the best of my abilities at the time. It also reminds me that I might want to pump the brakes a little bit more and be a little bit more mindful of how many things I'm putting on my schedule, because there is going to be a drop-off in the quality of my production if I'm running myself ragged. It's going to work the same way in your life, in your actual personal growth and development, in the rebuilding of your relationships, in the grounding yourself into a viable financial stability based off of a career that you actually enjoy. And I get that many of us live in communities where maybe not all the best jobs are located or the job you really want is, and you do have to decide, do you stay where you're at environmentally, or do you move yourself in order to find the opportunities that you want? These are all decisions that we get to make through the lens and perspective of sobriety and recovery. Now, I don't necessarily recommend on day 2 you picking up your whole life and packing it up and going across the country, because that's where opportunities are. I also don't recommend not doing that. I don't know your own personal circumstances, only you do. But you want to be making decisions based on how it is going to benefit your sobriety and recovery. And you might ultimately move environments and just realize, as I've said once, I'll say it again, everywhere you go, there you are. Your problems don't stay in your old environment, and you get to be a whole brand new person in your new environment. That's you follow you everywhere you go. Now, all those new people you meet when you go there, they don't know you. You do get to create a whole new personification. But if that old you somehow creeps in to all these new places, then all you've really done is just pick up everything and been the same person where you got. This is why we're looking for the quality of our sobriety and recovery to be more so than the quantity. You can go to 90 meetings in 90 days, but if you're not actually listening and participating and learning and getting involved in your steps or getting involved in your 4 truths or getting involved in your program, then congratulations, you just went to 90 meetings, but what did you really accomplish other than being able to say you went to 90 meetings? Versus the person who might only go to 1 a week, but they're over there, they're journaling, they're meditating, they're eating healthy, they're exercising, they're reading books and listening to podcasts that help them out. They're having deep, vulnerable, involved conversations with their loved ones to figure out what's going on in their relationships so they can begin healing those. I'd rather be that person going to 1 meeting a week and then working their ass off the other 167 hours than somebody who's like, yeah, I go to 9 meetings a day. Well, what are you doing with all that information? I just go to the next meeting. Well, where's the healing? Where's the acceptance? And I'm not saying those who go to 90 and 90 aren't doing these things. I'm just simply making a point of you could do quantity and 90 and 90, but if all you're doing is just going to the meeting, then going home, sitting on your couch in your underwear, eating the bonbons, watching The Simpsons, versus the person who goes to 1 meeting a week, but is going and they're getting super involved in their program and they're handling their physical, emotional, mental, spiritual health. They're monitoring their spheres of career, self, and relationship. They're actually getting deeply involved in their personal growth journey. Then I'm just saying, you don't need the quantity of 90 and 90 if you're doing, let's just say 12 and 12, right? 12 meetings in 12 weeks. And then you're spending a ton of time outside of there working on your healing, working on your system, your program. Part of that is going to be rebuilding relationships with yourself and with others. Another part of that's going to be getting healthy. It's going to be eating right. It's going to be drinking more water. It's not going to be staying up till 2, 3, 4 in the morning, binge watching shows with your hand down a potato chip bag. Your long-term mindset is what we're looking for here. Adopt that long-term perspective. View it as a lifelong journey. View it as the marathon that never ends versus the Usain Bolt sprint that might take 9.5 seconds. But where's he going to get if he tries to run long distances? His body isn't built for that. I want your sobriety and recovery journey to be built for the long haul, not for the 9.5 second sprint. Figuring out ways in a 9.5 second moment where you're getting the craving or somebody's offering you the alcohol, yet you say no, that you turn around from that and you walk away from it. That's extremely important. And you learn these things as you get more involved in your sobriety and recovery. Very few people get sober and then literally, I'm still detoxing my first morning, having to walk into a bar, and I'll never forget that there was a big event going on across the street from the hotel I was working at, and all these people came over, and they were clearly been on cocaine, and they were sitting here slamming back Bloody Marys. That was my first day of sobriety and recovery, was bartending for all these super high people on my drug of choice, drinking Bloody Marys. That's how I got to spend my first 2 hours of my sober morning, was bartending for other people. And I remember locking it in saying, I don't ever want to look like them again. I don't ever want to be somewhere like they are right now, trying to chase a dragon that they can never catch. I chose in that moment to lock that in as this is exactly the kind of person I'm tired of being, is the person across from my bar right now. And I have to listen to their dumbass conversations, making up stories about businesses that they would start and completely lying to themselves about the direction their life was going at because, hey, they've been up all night snorting lines and now they're sitting here at this fancy hotel drinking $15 Bloody Marys, feeling like they're high on the hog, but everybody wakes up with a hangover. And that's reality. So some practical tips that you can follow. I'll get you out of here on this. Set realistic goals. Break down these long-term goals into manageable short-term objectives. I do this all the time, prioritizing one thing each day, having 4 focuses. The other things I'm working on as I'm also working on that one big priority of the day. And you stack up enough of these priorities day in and day out, and you've accomplished great things. You have to prioritize your self-care. Do you have a way to be more physically active, to eat healthier, to read books or listen to podcasts? Listen to books that give you a different perspective, that help reinvigorate your mindset. How are you working on your emotions? Self-care and emotions can start with meditation or yoga or any of those kind of things that also get your body involved. Hell, deep breathing exercises are amazing for sustaining long-term self-care of not just your physical body, but also of your emotional groundedness and centeredness. And what are you doing about your spirituality? How are you monitoring your morals, ethics, values, opinions, beliefs, principles, standards of habits? Are you writing things down? Because keeping a journal in your head, it's just that same annoying voice that Michael Singer talks about in The Untethered Soul. He just rattling off a bunch of shit. Till you write it down, you record it, you shoot a video of yourself talking about it, till you get it out of your head and make it more tangible in the real world. It's just a bunch of blah, blah, blah in your head. Prioritizing self-care is of the utmost importance, however you define that. I want you to seek support, whether that's by listening to my show, giving me a call, and let's figure out how maybe recovery and coaching helps, engaging with a therapist, counseling, support groups, a sponsor, a mentor, whomever it be. I want you to seek out support from someone who gets you, from someone who knows what it's like to walk a mile or 20,000 in those shoes. I know a lot of people in my community who are counselors who want to help people with addiction recovery, but have never been an addict, have never had to walk a system, work a program. It's really difficult for people who've got a long-term amount of time in addiction to want to take much counsel from somebody who doesn't fully understand what it's like to be addicted. So find the right person that helps you. Practicing patience, and I got in this great conversation about the other day. Don't ask God, don't pray for patience, because He just gives you things you have to be patient about. Patience is the attitude you have while you're waiting. Understand that recovery is not linear. It's going to have a lot of different levels of setbacks, and they aren't all lapsing and relapsing. There's a lot of different ways we can perceive a moment as a setback. So patience in yourself is key, realizing that it's going to take time and being calm and having gratitude and humility as you practice this patience. That, to me, is patience. Gratitude for the life that you do have. Humility for the mistakes we've made, forgiving ourselves, and realizing life doesn't always work the way we planned it when we were 5, 7, 9, 13 years old. Patience is the attitude you have while you are working on something. How you treat yourself as you are moving forward. Or even more so, how you are treating yourself when you think you've taken a step back. And whether you get into mindfulness and meditation and breathing, however you choose to find a way of staying grounded, hell, it could be spinning around in a circle 10 times real fast while touching your finger to your nose. However you choose to get mindful and ground yourself. You could juggle tennis balls, whatever it might be, playing with your dog, your cat, going outside for a walk whenever it's freezing ass cold, just to prove to yourself that you do hard things. Whatever you do, make it your own. Choose that this is one of my mindfulness practices. When we embrace the journey of addiction recovery without the pressure of trying to make up for lost time by focusing on the consistency of our progress, of the self-acceptance that comes from nurturing our own soul, from learning to trust ourselves, which grows the love we desire for ourselves. This is building the sustainable foundation for a healthier future. It's building your sustainable foundation for a healthier you. Everybody else who gets to come live inside your metaphorical addiction recovery home gets to experience the benefits of your hard work, often in the shadows, when there's no one watching what you're doing, when there's no one there to tell you not to use or not to stay up late eating sugar and watching TV. You're the one who is making so many of these decisions when there's not an audience to be found. But that's how champions are built. That's how champions are made. The Michael Phelpses of the world, or the Tom Bradys and the Peyton Mannings, the Walter Paytons, any athlete you may have watched in any sport, so much of what they've done, have done, is maybe at best done under the watchful eye of their coach. But even then, the coach isn't always around them. He's not there to make sure they go to bed on time, get up early, eat the right things, sleep the right way, drink the right amount of water, do the healthy things. It's like a personal trainer who gets you for 3 hours a week. What are you doing the other 165 hours of the week when they're nowhere to be found? So much of what we do is done inside our minds and outside with our body with not a soul to be found, with no one watching over us telling us not to do it. You have to be the one who tells yourself, no, I will not put myself in this situation. No, I will not make this decision. No, I will not do this thing because this is not benefiting the foundation of my sobriety and recovery. 7.5 years in, and I still run things through the filter of, is this going to benefit my sobriety and recovery? I try to make sure that the answer always says yes. Putting 11 major things in a 22-day period at the end of March and April may have not been the best thing for me emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually, but I did the hard things. It's what I committed to, and I made it happen. But would I have been willing to do that at week 1, month 3, year 1? I was making a lot more mindful decisions about what I was willing to put myself through in order to make sure that I didn't put myself into a situation I wasn't ready for. You cannot go back in time and make up for lost time. That is bullshit. It's a fallacy. There's no matter how hard you work right now, are you going to be able to make up for years and years and years of what you perceive as wasted time. But it's only wasted time when you choose to look at it as if it is wasted time. There's a lesson to be learned. There's a feedback to be had. You are a strong, resilient person. You used to be what is it they say, a hopeless dope fiend, and now you're a dopeless hope fiend. The power of who you desire to be is locked up inside of you. When you begin to break down the wall, crack through the facade you have built up around yourself, that strength, that determination, that fortitude, that trust, that self-love you desire, it's in there. It's in there. Don't let anyone tell you that it's not. No person is broken. No person is destroyed. You might be bruised. You might need to put yourself back together again. But the human spirit is resilient. Choose to see yourself through that lens, realizing that you can't make up for lost time, but you can do the most with your time today. And that's what matters the most, the present moment. Do something with it that one day you'll look back and say, thank you, Jesse, for doing that then, because the benefits, I'm exploring them, I'm enjoying them, and I'm getting all the benefits from those decisions you made then now. Bless you, man. Bless you. That's the sentence I love to say to myself every day. I hope you can start saying that sentence to yourself too. And maybe you already are. And that, my friends, is what the journey from sobriety to recovery is all about. As always, inclusivity over exclusivity, the power of positive energy, release and flow. Every day is the best day of our lives when we wake up sober. Shout out to Sunshine and Robert. Glow on. I will see you next week. Bye-bye.